Why is there evil in the world? It's a question that we wrestle with today, that we debate and we think about all the time in our day-to-day lives. Why is there evil in the world around us? But you know, this question is not a 21st century question. We didn't come up with it. It's a question that humanity has asked in all of our existence. We have always looked at our world and wondered, why is there this brokenness and dysfunction everywhere that we look? And what is it that we can do to get rid of it? How do we change the reality of the life that we experience? And this is a question that the prophet Habakkuk wrestled with in his book that we can read in the Old Testament. Habakkuk lived in about the 7th century BC. He lived in the nation of Israel, and over the course of his life, Habakkuk saw his nation go from one that honoured God and loved him and sought to care and love one another, to a nation turning its back on God, turning to self-centred and selfish ways, acting in violence and with dysfunction towards one another, not caring for the vulnerable among them. And Habakkuk lamented this evil and brokenness that he saw and wrestled with God. He asked the very same question that we asked today. Centuries ago, millennia ago, this was the question on Habakkuk's mind. Let's read together the opening words of Habakkuk's book.
This reading is from Habakkuk, chapter 1, verses 1 to 5. The prophecy that Habakkuk the prophet received. How long, Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen, or cry out to you violence, but you do not save? Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? Destruction and violence are before me. There is strife and conflict abounds. Therefore, the law is paralyzed, and justice never prevails. The wicked hem in the righteous, so that justice is perverted. Look at the nations and watch, and be utterly amazed. For I am going to do something in your days, and that you would not believe, even if you were told.
These final words from this reading are words spoken by God himself. Returning to Habakkuk's question, God says, look at the nations and watch. Be utterly amazed, for I am going to do something in your days that you would not believe even if you were told. This is the kind of verse, the scripture, that a preacher like me looks for to preach on, to motivate and to celebrate with people, that God is going to do something incredible in your life, something that you wouldn't believe in response to your challenges, so good that it will change, that you would not believe it, even if you were to be told. This is the sort of thing that you would want to tweet to encourage people, the kind of verse that you would make into an Instagram post and share it on your socials, the sort of thing that you might want to print and put on a poster on your wall. God is going to do something good, something so profound. He's going to change your circumstance so powerfully you wouldn't believe it. The problem is, God is not saying these words with a positive mindset. He's not saying to Habakkuk, this is going to be so good that you wouldn't believe it if I told you. He's in fact saying, Habakkuk, what I'm going to do is so bad. It's so confronting. It's so challenging. You wouldn't believe me, even if I told you what I have planned. In the very next verse, verse 6, God says to Habakkuk, I'm going to raise up the nation of Babylon. They are a nation more wicked and more evil than the brokenness that you're lamenting. And they are going to overrun your nation of Israel. They will remove your evil and your wickedness and replace it with an even greater evil. They will wipe you off the map. You will be dissolved as a nation and you'll be taken away in exile. And this challenges Habakkuk. He does not know what to make. God's in fact right. Habakkuk doesn't believe these words and he begins to debate and challenge God and push him on what exactly it is that God has planned. How could a situation going from bad to worse actually justify and be an answer to the evil that Habakkuk sees around him? And today I want to talk to you about what you do when a situation seemingly goes from bad to worse in your life. No matter what you do, no matter your intentions, it just gets worse. Maybe you've been praying for healing in a health battle that you're in, and things are seemingly going well. The answers are seemingly coming, and then out of the blue, a new diagnosis is given, and it turns out that in fact your health is not heading in the right direction. It's on another trajectory. What do you do when it goes from bad to worse? What do you do when, with sincerity, you're trying to restore a broken relationship, and no matter what you do, it just gets worse? And the distance and the brokenness between you and another only increases. What do you do when you live in a time in history where a virus controls the decisions of your world? And you hope and you believe and you wonder that maybe you're about to find freedom from this virus, but instead it comes roaring back and your society goes into another lockdown. What do you do in a season like this? That our city of Melbourne, that we live in, goes through the challenges that we experience today. When a situation seemingly goes from bad to worse, how do you respond? How do you find God? What questions do you ask of yourself in these moments? You know, I really think that there's two kind of polar opposite ways that we often deal with these sorts of challenges. The first is that we tend to respond with anger and bitterness, frustration, rage. We look for someone to blame. We fight to find a way to justify what's happened, and we look for someone that could carry the responsibility for the situation that we're in. Effectively, we turn and we run from the situation, blaming anyone and everyone around us. When it comes to faith, we turn to God and we say things like, well, if there really was a God, this wouldn't be happening. This kind of brokenness would not exist. This series of events I'm going through would not happen if God really was good. There can't be a God. He can't exist in the middle of this evil. You know this story. We feel this temptation at times in our lives. You know somebody that lives this way. Maybe you yourself are experiencing this kind of response to the challenges and the brokenness and the things going from bad to worse in your life. This is one way that we are tempted to respond, with frustration and blame. But another polar opposite response, I think, is just as damaging to our faith. Maybe in some ways I'd argue even more damaging. Rather than running from what is happening, we tend to just bury our head in the sand and pretend that it doesn't exist. Longing for what we used to have, wishing away the challenges and the struggles that we are now in, denying that it's here and basically just gritting our teeth and dealing with it until it passes. We don't talk to God about it. We don't challenge anything. We just simply carry on in life, pretending like maybe this doesn't exist, waiting to ride out the storm until a new day comes. But you know, there is another response. There is a response that Habakkuk chooses as he hears God's words and considers the bad to worse that God is speaking to him about. Habakkuk chooses not to run, not to hide, but instead to stand and wait for what it is God will say next. At the start of chapter 2, Habakkuk says, like a guard standing watch at night, God, I will wait. I will stand in the midst of what I don't understand, and I will wait for you to answer me. In other words, Habakkuk says, I won't run, I won't hide. God, what you're saying doesn't make sense. You need to come and answer me. You need to give me something, because that doesn't work. God, I will not move. I will stand and wait for you to respond to me. You know, in both of these polar opposite responses, they look completely different, but under the surface, they actually have the same core motivation. They're both about removing and limiting the harm that we're feeling. They're both about leaning out of the reality of life and denying that it's here so that we can avoid any more harm being created. It makes sense. It's a natural way that we might feel tempted to respond to our situation. But Habakkuk's response is not to diminish the pain and the harm and the dysfunction that he feels. It's actually to lean in, to continue in that place, to continue to experience all that doesn't make sense, but push into God and ask for him to give some more information. Now, I know that for some of us, this COVID season, it's not the hardest thing that you've ever gone through. It's not the most challenging thing in your life, and it's somewhat disconnected from the normal everyday experiences and challenges that you go through. I know that lockdown 2.0 It's inconvenient, but it might not be the worst thing in your life. There may be greater challenges that you are facing. For some of us, this season is pushing us to the edge of what we think we can handle. Research and the stats in our country say that the mental health of our country is deteriorating, that many people are thinking of self-harm when they haven't previously done so. This is terrifying. This is shocking. Whether or not this season of COVID confronts us dramatically or isn't too bad, this is an opportunity for us to actually stop and consider the ways we respond to the challenges in our lives, the ways we respond to the moments when life seemingly goes from bad to worse. Because let's face it, if we could, we would get rid of the challenge that we're in. We would pass it and want to go back to a different way of life. But the temptation is there. We can either be frustrated and angry, we can run, or we can hide. Both of these responses are actually a superficial response. It's about avoiding the challenge. Both of these responses end up kidding ourselves that our past was actually better than our present. We find ourselves longing to go back to the history that we once had, telling ourselves stories like, well, eventually when we can go back to the way life was, it will be better, we'll be happier, we'll be filled with more joy. But the reality is, 4 months ago, life wasn't perfect. There were things in my life that I wasn't happy with, things that I wanted to change, that I wanted to see develop, that I wanted to grow in my life and in this world. And in your life 4 months ago, things weren't perfect. There was things that weren't all together. And 4 months ago, we used to complain. We used to long for a better time. And the reality is when we kid ourselves into believing that some other point in life was better, that the challenges that we faced then weren't so hard, when we allow a new challenge to overcome the old challenges and long to go back, we effectively long to go back to the same dysfunctions that once ruled us, the same evil that we once lamented, the same brokenness that once ruled our lives. When we kid ourselves that our history was better than the challenge we're in now, that if only we could go back, life would be better, we effectively choose to remain enslaved to the brokenness of our history. We choose to remain captive to the evil of our past. Not to go forward, not to live for more, but to remain enslaved to all that was broken. You were made for more than that. You were made to live for more than that kind of existence. You were made to experience life, to live in hope, to live in joy. You were made not for slavery, but to live in freedom. And to long to just go back to what you once had is effectively to long to stay in slavery. Friends, you were made for more than that. This season challenges us to consider the ways in which we respond to the brokenness of our lives. Because here's what's true. We will eventually go back. We will eventually go back to the way life was. This too will pass, just like every challenge in history has. We will shake hands again. We will hug. We will go over to one another's houses and not think of it. We will go back to somewhat what we have experienced. But I don't want to go back to the same life that I left 4 months ago. I don't want to go back the same me, with the same dysfunctions and challenges and sin and evil that I carried. You know, if I'm not willing to ask the deeper questions of who I am, how can I expect for anything in my life to actually change? If in humility I'm not willing to confront and challenge the evil that exists within me, how can the evil of the world around me ever actually change? No, I don't want to go back the same way that I came into this season. I want to go back changed. I want to go back in a new, vibrant way of health and life and hope and joy. I want that for me, and I want that for you. Because ultimately, God did answer Habakkuk. He did come to Habakkuk waiting and longing for an answer. And God said to Habakkuk, you're right. To replace one evil with a greater evil is no way to actually live. But don't worry about that. I will deal with Babylon's dysfunction. I will deal with their brokenness. I will bring justice against their behavior. It's not up to you, Habakkuk, to worry about that. I will answer for the brokenness that they bring on your nation. But I will use this moment to change you, to grow you, to bring you forward. I will use this moment to show the nation of Israel what it looks like to truly be my people, what it looks like to know who they are, to know who I am, and to know what it looks like to call them towards being a light among these nations. Habakkuk, I'm going to refine your people. I'm going to heal them through this challenge. And in fact, over the next 200 or 300 years, this is exactly what happened. Babylon rose to become a powerful, dominant nation in the ancient world. They overtook the nation of Israel and wiped them off the map, destroyed their city of Jerusalem, completely annihilated them, and took them away into exile for 2 generations, where they lived divorced from all that they once were, divorced from their life, their tradition, their culture, their religion, completely void of their identity, a people lost among this nation, consumed and surrounded by what they saw as wickedness and evil. And God did a profound work. For that remnant who lived in that time, rather than running and hiding, rather than ignoring and pretending that this wasn't real, they dug deep. They confronted the reality of their challenge. They went deep into the questions of their history, and God began to stir something in these people. They did, in fact, return. Under the leadership of people like Nehemiah and Ezra, they returned to Jerusalem to rebuild their nation. God, in fact, did bring justice against the nation of Babylon and answered the wickedness and the evil of their ways. And while they came back geographically to the same city, to the same place, to the same nation, they came back a new people, a changed people, a healed people, in the same place but changed completely from the people that left 70 years earlier, with a new understanding of who they were called to be, who God was leading them to become, what it looked like to be a nation and a people that revealed God's light to this world, determined to not make the same mistakes of their past, to not live enslaved and captured to their history, but to live in a new, vibrant truth that God was leading them towards. They came back changed from the people that left. This is the call of Jesus to his followers today. That we would enter into an ever-changing and ever-growing and ever-deepening experience of who God is, of who we are, and who he is calling us to be. In the account of Revelation 21, God says that he is in the business of making all things new, that all things are made new through him, that the evil and the brokenness of this world will be accounted for and is answered for in the death and resurrection of Jesus, that their justice prevails against all evil and brokenness that we see. And God begins the work of all things being made new. But here's the thing that's powerful. And here's the thing I want you to know today. That the evil and the brokenness of this world is being made new. But the thing that's incredible is not that alone. It's that I am being made new. You are invited to be being made new. It's not the external world, but it starts with the internal world that is being made new. Jesus' invitation is not for us to be spectators or commentators or people that simply speak of his work of being made new. No, we're called to be players on the field, participants, people who are in the business, who are experiencing the joy and the hope and the life of being made new, who are seeing the evil and the brokenness of our lives being restored, being made new into something of beauty and of worth. And as we enter into this journey, we don't turn away, we don't run, we don't hide, but we stand and wait to see what it is that God wants to confront in us and to allow him to bring transformation and health we join in on this resurrection story. As we put to death the brokenness and the evil of our lives, we allow the life and the resurrection of hope to take its place. The world will see Jesus' resurrection in me as I allow this truth to be my reality. When my world goes from bad to worse, when my challenges are all around me, and I choose to invite God in, to wait on Him, and to confront all that is wrong and needs health and healing in me, I become a part of this journey of being made new. When I don't turn and run, when I don't hide, when I don't try and deflect and ignore what is true, but instead I embrace it, I lean in, and I wait for God to heal, I become a part of His incredible work in this world. Friends, may this be our experience in this season. May this be what happens in God's church, in this world, in this country, and in our city through this season. May we not run and hide. May we not pretend that things were better and lie to ourselves that if we could just go back, everything would be okay. No, let's dig deep. Let's be a church that challenges all that is wrong within us, that challenges our own weakness and looks to all that God is calling us to be. Friend, may this be your experience. May this be my experience. For those of us that live in Melbourne, about to go through another 6 weeks of lockdown, may we take this opportunity to allow all that is broken and wrong with us to be put to death, to be laid to rest, and allow the resurrection hope of Jesus to take hold. May you experience life as you begin to see in a new and fresh way who God is through this season, who you are, and who it is that He is calling you to be.